A Course in
What?
with Cynthia Morgan.
Hey, course friends. Welcome to A Course in What? I'm Cynthia Morgan, and this is a podcast in which I read and discuss the text of A Course in Miracles. And this is podcast episode number 14. And before I begin, I want to read a question that I received this week, which is a great question. I think it's going to help all of the listeners because it's something that everybody struggles with, I think, at one time or another on their journey with the Course. And I'll just read it here and then discuss it. So this person writes, my personal ego self has had a long history with compulsions. I had an eating disorder when I was younger in my 20s and 30s and abused alcohol, currently 16 years abstinence. The past 5 years, I have struggled with drinking and quitting coffee. I only drink about 1.5 cups of coffee in the morning, but it can cause me jitters and irritation. Still, I choose to drink it. No doubt my ego telling me I have given everything up and now I have to give up coffee too. There is really conflict within me over this small issue. I was thinking about tonight's podcast and asked myself, what is it for? What is drinking my 1.5 cups of coffee each morning for? Does it bring me closer to the truth, to love? It brings me pleasure because I enjoy it. On page 63, the Course says, I have said that you cannot change your mind by changing your behavior, but I have also said, and many times, that you can change your mind. So there is a part of me that says giving up my coffee is changing the behavior, and all healing is at the level of the mind, right? So do I keep drinking my coffee with the Holy Spirit, not change my behavior, but allow it to be, and hope it eventually falls away, and deal with the side effects? It is all confusing to me. Are the side effects of the small amount of coffee just in my mind as the body is neutral? I gave up alcohol at the behavior level because of how it affected me. But if I go back to the quote above, could I have kept drinking alcohol, healed my mind, and then the use of alcohol would have just fell away naturally as my mind healed? It seems to me that abstinence is working in form or the personal ego system. Also, it is true that attachments and aversions create suffering. So what does the Course say? I hope this makes sense. I think the question is important to me because at what level does one work with behaviors and issues, mind or body behavior? Okay, so first of all, congratulations on your 16 years of sobriety. And secondly, thank you for this question. It's something, as I said before, that I think almost everyone struggles with, the level of behavior and form and knowing that this world is an illusion and also knowing that healing occurs in the mind, as you're correct. So I'm sure a lot of Course students can relate to this conflict. A Course in Miracles says that the ego analyzes and the Holy Spirit accepts. And often through that analyzing, we get stuck on the metaphysics of the Course and deny our experience here. We deny our body and the world, and we deny our pain and suffering in ourselves and others because we reduce everything down to it just being an illusion. As students of the Course, unless you're enlightened, I don't believe anything can hinder your spiritual growth more than that. More than just simply saying it's all an illusion or getting stuck in the metaphysics. Because if you don't believe your body was a part of you, because if you didn't believe your body was a part of you and that the world was real on some level, you wouldn't even be here. So we can safely surmise that if you're in the world, there's a part of you that believes it's real to you. And I'm speaking not to this questioner, but to all of us. You don't want to deny your experiences. You want to use your experiences to deny the ego. You may recall that in the last episode, we talked about denial. The section talked about denial a lot, and the ego's use of denial is to deny you made the world or your experiences and then become a victim of what you made instead. And contrasting that with the Holy Spirit's use of denial, which is to deny that the ego thought system has any power over your holy mind, thus denying the body and the world have any power over you. Again, this doesn't mean that you deny your experience. It just means that you remember that you are greater than that experience, that the experience or your body doesn't define you. So getting back to the situation with coffee or whatever substance someone is struggling with, I find that if something is affecting me personally negatively and I keep using it, then the reason it's affecting me negatively is because I'm not learning the lesson it's there to teach me. More specifically, I'm not letting it go. I'm clinging to it, believing that my salvation or my happiness is somehow wrapped up in it. And as a result, I'm not accepting myself as a holy child of God. So it's not about coffee in and of itself, or alcohol or sugar. Those things are neutral. They are nothing because they're illusions. Rather, it's about the question that we talked about in the last episode: what is it for? Am I not letting it go because it gives me pleasure? Who is it giving pleasure to? To your body? To your ego? To the Holy Spirit? The Holy Spirit doesn't need pleasure. Your higher self doesn't need pleasure. So our only real pleasure, as the Course tells us, comes from God. There's a line in A Course in Miracles that says, "Holy child of God, when will you learn that only holiness can content you and give you peace?" Pleasure and pain are different sides of the same coin. You see, you can't have one without the other. Pleasure in terms of satisfying our body or ego, what we think of as pleasure. So it's probably the investment that you have in coffee giving you pleasure that then creates the pain, the jitters and the irritation. Obviously, some people can drink coffee with no problem. I would say that there isn't a lesson in that for them then. And in terms of giving it up, it's true that in that quote that you cited, Jesus tells us that we cannot change our mind by changing our behavior. But as long as we are engaged in deleterious behavior, there's no way we can even begin to change our mind. So we first need to stop the behavior before we can change our mind. The first thing I do with cigarette smokers who come to see me to stop smoking is to get them to stop the behavior before we can even begin to look at what's underneath that. As an extreme example, if someone is addicted to heroin, I wouldn't tell him or her to look at his ego or his childhood. That would be fruitless. He couldn't do it. I first need to get him to stop shooting heroin each day. He first needs to stop the behavior and detox his body. Then he can begin to look at what's underneath the behavior, what started the addiction and what sustained the addiction. In other words, what is it for? And all of that, those answers are in his mind. Now, even though I'm talking about stopping the behavior first, there has been a shift in his thinking, a decision that was made that even allowed him to consider stopping the behavior. For instance, a smoker has to first decide that she's had enough of cigarettes and that there must be another way before she calls me and makes an appointment. So somewhere in her mind, she made a decision. She's still stuck in the addiction of cigarettes, but somewhere in her mind, she made a different choice, that there could possibly be another way. She recognized that smoking isn't working. She's going to die. It's hurting her and everyone around her. So she made a decision to stop, even though she hasn't yet stopped the behavior. And that decision is what the Course would define as a little willingness. The Course tells us that all we need is a little willingness to have our minds healed. Somewhere in the mind, there's the recognition that there's another way. So in terms of what you do with coffee, you could keep drinking the coffee with the Holy Spirit, as you had suggested, and just see what happens. Maybe you realize that you don't want it anymore, and there's no struggle in giving it up. And that might be the most loving response to inviting the Holy Spirit in to your use of coffee. Just like an addict going into recovery is usually a loving response. That's choosing the love in your mind can then change that behavior. Or maybe you find out that you can drink coffee without the side effects because you've learned the lesson. So, underneath all of this is just a lesson to be learned. You and the Holy Spirit have a unique relationship. So, I don't really know what will happen. I can speak for myself. And for me, I knew I needed to let go of drinking alcohol. And it'll be 12 years this August. I didn't have a traditional drinking problem in that I was an alcoholic. Rather, I developed the inability to drink. I would occasionally have a beer or a glass of wine a couple of times a week, but without fail, the next morning I would wake up with a sore throat and a feeling of depression and guilt. And it wasn't always like that, but it developed into that for the last couple of years that I was drinking. And for me, I finally figured out that it was my higher self or the Holy Spirit telling me that I didn't need that anymore. I didn't need a beer to relax or a glass of wine to fit in with my girlfriends and have a nice evening. I tried to make alcohol work in my life. I even switched to all kinds of brands and concoctions, but no matter what I drank, they all left me with the same result the next morning. So one day I went to see a wonderful musician named Alejandro Escovedo play in a small bar in Kansas City. And he was an acquaintance just because I was such a fan. And he bought me a beer after the show. And I had been thinking, I was about to move to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And so I think he bought me a beer to sort of send me off. And I had been thinking of giving up alcohol for months at that point. I might have even tried a couple of times. And I said to myself, well, there's no better last drink than the one Alejandro Escovedo buys you. So I stopped. And that was the last drink I had. And I no longer woke up with sore throats and feeling guilty and depressed. I learned the lesson. I didn't need alcohol to reinforce my ego or the guilt in my mind. And that's all that it was doing at that point. It was telling me that I was getting something out of it, some pleasure. But the truth is, it was just contributing to me staying stuck in guilt. I don't underestimate the power of abstinence. As long as you are in a body, don't deny that. Work on both levels. Discomfort in your body becomes a symbol of discomfort in your mind. In other words, choosing the wrong teacher, focusing on the illusion and giving it power over your holy mind. My relinquishing alcohol was not about healing my sore throat. It was about healing my mind. It was about taking that next step in my spiritual evolution and realize that all I needed was within. So going back to the question, what is it for? I didn't need alcohol to relax. I didn't need alcohol to fit in. I didn't need alcohol to have a good time. I was being called to wake up and realize that I could do all of that on my own. I didn't need to rely on alcohol for anything anymore. In fact, if I wanted to become enlightened, then clearly using alcohol as a crutch had to be released. And in the releasing of it, I learned that alcohol had no power over me. I had been using it to keep the Holy Spirit out, to keep God out. So in the end, there isn't a cut and dry answer, unfortunately, because it's your atonement lesson. And as the Course says, that's a unique path for you. I believe that you want to work with both the physical and mental level. Even though the body was made by the ego to keep separation alive, given to the Holy Spirit, it becomes a learning device. That irritation, those jitters, are trying to teach you something. I hope that that was helpful in answering your question. I hope I said something in that illuminated the answer for you. And it's actually just perfect that you asked this question this week because it kind of ties into our next section. And we'll continue on with that section then. Okay, so we are on Chapter 2, the Separation and the Atonement, Section 3, the Altar of God. And what we find by reading this section is that Helen was starting to get the hang of scribing because you'll notice that it's not as choppy as the previous sections. This section is more uniformed with one kind of overarching theme. So the title, The Altar of God. Now, the altar is not talking about something external. I think most of us connect that word with a structure and the church, but rather it's talking about our mind. So it's not physical, but internal. It's the light within us. Paragraph 1. The atonement can only be accepted within you by releasing the inner light. So once again, the atonement is the process of undoing our ego. And as we just talked about with that question, everybody has their own lessons in undoing their ego. The atonement is the recognition of our oneness, of our connection to God. And that's the purpose of miracles, shifting our perception along our path of atonement until we recognize that oneness. So the atonement can only be accepted. Another way of saying that is that the atonement can only be acknowledged within you by releasing the inner light. In other words, by extending that light, extending the shifts in perceptions. It's like you know that there is light in you by your ability to extend that light. That you know that there is love in you by your ability to extend love to other people. 2. Since the separation, defenses have been used almost entirely to defend against the atonement and thus maintain the separation. So once we had the thought of separation, this whole world and our body was created, everything physical was created as a defense against the truth, against that atonement principle. And we believe in what we made. So we maintain the separation by believing in these ego defenses. 3, this is generally seen as a need to protect the body. So the body is a symbol of separation to the ego. And that's another way of saying it's a need to protect our identification as individuals. 4, the many body fantasies in which minds engage arise from the distorted belief that the body can be used as a means for attaining atonement. Now, you may recall from an earlier episode, we talked about this word fantasies, and I was mentioning that originally that was referring to sexual fantasies. And so it might still be the case here, was Jesus' intention. And he could have been addressing Helen specifically about a question she had or something that was going on in her own life. But we now are using this idea of fantasies to mean anything that the ego fantasizes about, winning the lottery, whatever that may be. So all of these fantasies are a way of usurping God rather than attaining that atonement through what we talked about earlier. Holy child of God, when will you learn that only your holiness can content you and give you peace? Instead, we use these body fantasies in order to achieve the quote atonement, that contentment and peace. In fact, it's a fantasy to even think that we can be fulfilled on the physical level by the body. 5, perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this distortion because it alters only part of it. I think that what Jesus is saying here is that perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step, meaning perceiving your body as a tool for the Holy Spirit. And he could have been talking about taking care of the body, treating your body lovingly. Perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this distortion. So instead of seeing the body as a means of separation through these fantasies, we see our body in a more loving response and we treat it more lovingly. 6, it does recognize that atonement in physical terms is impossible, but that's only part of it. We can't achieve enlightenment through our behavior. That's going to occur in our mind through shifting our perceptions. 7, the next step, however, is to realize that a temple is not a structure at all. And so he's then saying that the next step is to realize that the body isn't even who you are. And he could be referring as well to the church temples, that the true temple isn't a structure. The true temple is that altar to God in our mind. 8, Its true holiness lies at the inner altar around which the structure is built. Okay, so I think I just addressed that. 9, the emphasis on beautiful structures is a sign of the fear of atonement and an unwillingness to reach the altar itself. So if we focus just on what our physical eyes show us, and he could be talking about structures like the church or the altars in the church. And there's this whole thing of like the more ostentatious the church, the closer you are to God, or the higher the steeple, the closer you are to God. Those structures are just really a fear of the atonement. They're a fear of really looking within. And he could be talking about the body as well, the emphasis on beautiful structures, talking about the body as a temple, is a sign of the fear of the atonement, not looking beyond the body to the spirit. 10, the real beauty of the temple cannot be seen with the physical eye. Right, because that true beauty lies beyond the illusion. 11, spiritual sight, on the other hand, cannot see the structure at all because it is perfect vision. So the Holy Spirit looks beyond illusions, looks beyond structures, looks beyond the body. 12, it can, however, see the altar with perfect clarity. So it can see the mind with perfect clarity. It can see the spirit with perfect clarity. Paragraph 2. For perfect effectiveness, the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar, where it undoes the separation and restores the wholeness of the mind. So when it says the atonement belongs at the center of the inner altar, that to me is just another way of saying at the center of your consciousness, at the forefront of your consciousness. It's the thing that we are thinking about each day. It's the thing that we are committed to. 2, before the separation, the mind was invulnerable to fear because fear did not exist. So fear is just a way of blocking us from that spiritual sight, from reaching that atonement. 3, both the separation and the fear are miscreations that must be undone for the restoration of the temple and for the opening of the altar to receive the atonement. Fear is blocking us from recognizing our truth, from recognizing the atonement in our mind. The belief in separation is what causes fear. And so those need to be undone in order to recognize something beyond the illusion, in order to recognize your oneness. 4, this heals the separation by placing within you the one effective defense against all separation thoughts and making you perfectly invulnerable. So the one effective defense is the acceptance of the atonement, the acceptance of that truth. And that trumps all separation thoughts. When you do accept that as your truth, then you are perfectly invulnerable. Paragraph 3. The acceptance of the atonement by everyone is only a matter of time. You may recall from the introduction in which it says, this is a Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. Everyone at some point will accept the atonement. And that's hard to fathom from where we sit because we judge other people and think that they're really far off from accepting the atonement in their lives. But then we need to remember that we too haven't accepted the atonement in our own lives. And by accepting the atonement, I mean have completely transcended the belief and fear and guilt of separation. So what Jesus is saying here is he's reassuring us and telling us that at some point, everyone will wake up. 2, this may appear to contradict free will because of the inevitability of the final decision, but this is not so. So there's a part of us that is afraid of what he's just saying because that means that our will really isn't free in terms of what we think of. It means that eventually we will accept the atonement. But what we need to remember is that we want to accept the atonement, that everyone will get to that point and recognize that there must be another way. Just like what we talked about with the addict before going into recovery. There must be a better way. We're all addicted to this world and addicted to the ego thought system. So at some point, we have to turn that corner, just like going into recovery, and recover from our ego thought system and recognize that there is another way, and that other way does make us happier. But everyone going into recovery is scared, just like everyone here doesn't want to be told that eventually you'll all be in recovery. There's comfort for us in staying stuck in the illusion, in our addiction to this world. 3, you can temporize and you are capable of enormous procrastination, but you cannot depart entirely from your Creator. So just like a ray of sun can't separate from the sun, or a wave of ocean can't separate from the ocean, we can never separate from our Creator. So there's limits to how far that ray of sun can shine. There's limits to how far that wave can roll all by itself. 4, an imprisoned will engenders a situation which in the extreme becomes altogether intolerable. So that's that moment right before we choose recovery, right before we decide that there must be another way. At some point, our imprisoned will, meaning that we're stuck in this perception of our body and the ego thought system, is going to become intolerable. 5, tolerance for pain may be high, but it is not without limit. I think we touched on that. 6, eventually everyone begins to recognize, however dimly, that there must be a better way. And that's referring, of course, to Helen and Bill when they were experiencing that turmoil in their work relationships, and how the course began when Bill made that impassioned speech and said, there must be another way. There must be a better way of dealing with the world and with each other. And that's when Helen agreed to help him find this other way, and out came A Course in Miracles. 7, as this recognition becomes more firmly established, it becomes a turning point. So we're not going to choose the Holy Spirit's voice over the ego until we recognize that choosing the ego has caused us pain. And at that point, we then make a different decision. 8, this ultimately reawakens spiritual vision, simultaneously weakening the investment in physical sight. So it's like we've turned away from the darkness and into the light. We're no longer facing the darkness, we're facing the light. 9, the alternating investment in the two levels of perception is usually experienced as conflict, which can become very acute. So we can experience this turning point as conflict because we aren't completely committed to the Holy Spirit at that point. And 10, but the outcome is as certain as God. But eventually we will wake up and recognize that we're happier, more peaceful, more loving human beings when we choose the Holy Spirit's perception. Paragraph 4, spiritual vision literally cannot see error and merely looks for atonement. Spiritual vision cannot see the illusion or the makings that occur within the illusion. It's merely looking simply past the illusion to the truth of each situation. 2, all solutions the physical eye seeks dissolve. So all those fantasies, all those things that we thought could fulfill us or could serve some purpose in making us happier, begin to dissolve, begin to disappear when we choose the Holy Spirit's vision. 3, spiritual vision looks within and recognizes immediately that the altar has been defiled and needs to be repaired and protected. So in other words, that the mind needs to be repaired and protected. 4, perfectly aware of the right defense, it passes over all others, looking past error to truth.
So it looks beyond the ego and the illusion to the truth within. 5, because of the strength of its vision, it brings the mind into its service. So it aligns our mind with the Holy Spirit. So everything becomes in alignment. There's no more conflict in that. 6, this reestablishes the power of the mind and makes it increasingly unable to tolerate delay, realizing that it only adds unnecessary pain. So once you recognize the truth of what's really occurring, that's what you want. 7, as a result, the mind becomes increasingly sensitive to what it would once have regarded as very minor intrusions of discomfort. So we could even relate this last sentence to the questioner about the coffee. It's causing her discomfort. It's causing her to be jittery and irritated. And just like my alcohol was causing me to have sore throats and wake up feeling depressed and guilty, what we could have once regarded as a minor intrusion of discomfort is now becoming increasingly more difficult to resolve. We're becoming increasingly more sensitive to these things. Paragraph 5. The children of God are entitled to the perfect comfort that comes from perfect trust. So what he's saying is you're entitled to feel peace. You're entitled to that perfect comfort. And the way that we begin to achieve that is by trusting that when we give up the ego thought system, we will be safe. 2, until they achieve this, they waste themselves and their true creative powers on useless attempts to make themselves more comfortable by inappropriate means. Okay, I think that we talked about that. Filling the body as a way to feel comfortable, using those bodily fantasies as a way of finding peace. Those are the inappropriate means. 3, but the real means are already provided and do not involve any effort at all on their part. So that, to me, refers back to that first sentence. The atonement can only be accepted. You don't need to really do anything. You just need to accept what is your natural birthright, what is your natural right as a son of God. 4, the atonement is the only gift that is worthy of being offered at the altar of God because of the value of the altar itself. So he's saying that your mind is holy, and the only thing that is worth that holiness is accepting the atonement for yourself. 5, it was created perfect and is entirely worthy of receiving perfection. You know, if we see ourselves as unworthy, then we're going to use unworthy means to try to numb that feeling within. But here he's saying, you are perfect and you are entirely worthy of receiving that perfection. You don't need to keep using these things. Of course, we can expand that to using this entire world to keep you separate from that truth. 6, God and his creations are completely dependent on each other. Okay, now this is sort of getting into a little bit of metaphor here because obviously God isn't dependent on us. The Course does speak in metaphor sometimes when it refers to God, only I think to invoke a feeling of an understanding that's helpful to us. 7, he depends on them because he created them perfect. 8, he gave them his peace so they could not be shaken and could not be deceived. 9, whenever you are afraid, you are deceived and your mind cannot serve the Holy Spirit. So if you're in fear, you're in the illusion, you're in the dream, and the dream is deceptive. The ego is deceptive. That's what he's saying. At that point, you can't even serve the Holy Spirit when you're in fear. 10, this starves you by denying you your daily bread. So if you are deceived, if you are buying into the illusion, to what your physical eyes tell you is real, to the belief in separation, you're being starved. You're starved because you're not being filled with that daily sustenance of the truth. 11, God is lonely without his sons, and they are lonely without him. Again, that's really a metaphor because we know that God is perfect and complete. 12, they must learn to look upon the world as a means of healing the separation. So we need to look at our experiences here as a means of healing the separation. What the ego would tell us that we need in order to keep us happy really just keeps us stuck in the separation. So even though the world was made by the ego to keep us deceived in this world of illusion, Jesus is asking us to begin to see the world differently, begin to see your experiences differently. Don't stay stuck in the belief, the metaphysics of the Course that are telling you that the ego is a form of separation. It's important to understand that, but what you want to really get to is that the world becomes a means of waking up. It becomes a means of healing the separation. Don't focus on the crucifixion, focus on the resurrection. Don't focus on why the world was made. Understand it on one level, but rather focus on the resurrection. Focus on extending love, seeing everyone and everything outside of you as one with you. That's how you begin to heal, not by staying stuck in the idea that the ego has created these experiences in the world. Again, it's important to look at that, but don't focus on that. Focus on the resurrection in your own experiences, in your own life, and in the world as an entirety. 13, the atonement is the guarantee that they will ultimately succeed. The carpet of time has already been rolled up, as we talked about early on in one of the episodes. The atonement is a statement that all of this has already been undone. So the atonement is the guarantee that we will all ultimately choose the Holy Spirit over the ego. We will choose that daily bread, that sustenance of God over the fantasies of our body, of our ego thought system. Okay, so we'll stop there. And if you want to stay in touch with me, you can do so through my website, which is cynthiamorgan.us. I'm also on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Cynthia Morgan Hypnotherapy. And I'm also on Twitter, and my handle is Cynthia S. Morgan. And I love receiving your emails. I love receiving your comments and questions. So I hope that you will continue to join me and continue to ask questions, and hopefully I can answer them a little bit. That helps you on your journey as well. All right. So if you would like to say the summary of A Course in Miracles with me, that would be great. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God.